Oh, there's High Cadet.
Okay, so let's. I'm gonna switch into real stream mode. So, boom, we're in the real stream.
What?
Welcome to the Undead Labs monthly challenge stream, everybody.
What's the monthly challenge?
The monthly challenge is called Silent Night. So in the month of December, you've got to stealth kill or kill with a suppressor. I think it's like 25 zombies at night. So
at night?
Yeah. So I've got actually all of my saves. So my main game save, my lifeline save, and my breakdown save are all at night right now. And so you can. I actually spent half an hour getting to nighttime just now before you came in, so that we could play the game at night. So hopefully Brant, as usual, as is his job, will unlock challenges for me.
Playing without cheat commands sucks.
Yeah, I know, right?
This game's so hard.
Yeah, it is. Oh, so Sakura Spirit says, needs stealth kills, takes loudest car in the game.
Vroom, vroom, vroom.
Exactly. Yeah, that's all the game is looking for is just the moment of the kill, not whether I'm being a loud jackass in general.
How many do I have to affect here is the question.
I think it's something like 25. I don't remember for sure, but I think it was 25.
Oh, that zombie knows I'm here. Look,
if we can find you a suppressor,
he doesn't know I'm here anymore.
This can be a lot simpler. Kirasu says, State of Decay 2 easier than State of Decay, confirmed. Only when we're playing with our cheat codes on.
Yeah.
I actually, if anything right now, the feedback we've been getting lately is that we've made it too hard.
A little touch too scary right now.
So there'll be definitely some tuning going on between now and the time you guys get it, so don't worry about that. But yeah, there's a lot of zombies in our game.
Stupid zombie.
So yes, we're doing a few things here today. So first off, Brant's gonna be trying to get this silent but deadly challenge.
What's the stealth kill again?
Oh, I think it was.
It's not that.
No, it was like left. Was it left bumper Y? Try left bumper Y.
This is the drawback of working on two different versions of games.
There we go.
There we go. Yeah.
Squish.
How does this game work again?
Yeah, True Fulgarian was telling us how to do it too. Left bumper Y. Because thank you, True Fulgarian.
I'm gonna actually use the bush. He doesn't know I'm here. Okay, he did. He saw it. All right.
So Consailor Star says, sounds like I might have to get some practice in State of Decay to shake off the rust before the sequel comes out. The problem with that is that there are subtle differences in the control scheme, which is a serious problem.
It's really weird adjusting muscle memory. Like, we've all spent so many hours playing this game that adjusting over even subtle differences in timing make all the difference in the world. So, I mean, there's certainly some things you can get used to doing.
I'm gonna sneak up on this horde.
Or you're just gonna stealth kill them all, one at a time.
Okay, that's the plan.
Nope, fail.
Okay, zombie horde alerted.
Back to the car.
That worked out.
Hey, looks like Cot Jockey's here.
Procedural gameplay at its best.
Get on a plane and get over here now. I need you to do this stealth thing because I can't.
So yeah, I just saw Cot Jockey's name the other day actually when I was working on the nickname for State of Decay 2.
Oh wow. Okay.
So yeah.
You have not been taking care of this community, Jeffrey.
I know, I really haven't.
Jeffrey.
This community exists only to do these streams, and usually just to drive around aimlessly while talking to people.
Okay, I'm gonna run around the building.
That horde's still coming.
And hopefully, I'll be able to.
So, yeah. Who is he sneaking up on?
Hey, Cot. Okay, I was gonna say, hey, Cot, does that sneaky exploit work? Does it count towards stealth kills? Because this is one of those.
Why did we decide to change the controls? Well, in some cases, it's new functionality that's been added, and we need to find places for them to exist. Other times, it's based on feedback we get from players, from whether it's internal or external. I mean, game design is constant iteration and improvement, and it's
You're getting my people killed.
And sometimes it's hard to sort of wrap your brain around that because you get so used to the way things are. But that's one of the ongoing challenges, is to make sure that we're always open to changing things to improve them where that's going to give a better overarching experience.
Yeah, and I will say that even though the controls for State of Decay 1, like everything else in the game, were absolutely perfect.
100% perfect. Nothing possibly could have been improved.
The controls make more sense once you get used to them.
Yeah.
They're
yeah, I'm a big fan of some of the decisions that we ended up making with the new game.
so this is really sneaky. Watch this.
And we've iterated them a lot. Like I've seen the discussions that Jeffrey has had with various folks about like, oh, should this be on this button? Should it be on that bumper? It's really interesting, and you have to really work at keeping that open mind and accepting that everybody's experience is genuine, right? Even if it doesn't match yours.
Yeah, like I remember there was, I don't play a lot of, say, racing games or car games at all on PC. But one of the designers on the team, Travis, brought up the fact he does play a lot of those, and there was a piece of functionality that he was missing. He felt like there was that he was used to having an easy way to brake that was separate from going in reverse. And that was something he'd gotten really used to playing car games on his PC that our control scheme didn't really have a space for. And so, I think we made a couple of adjustments to make that more friendly to him. And I don't think it ended up being like part of the default control scheme, but because it had other challenges to it. But that's the kind of thing. It's like each person has got their own background, their own gaming experience, and so we come into a game like this with just different expectations, right?
And then, on top of that, we have to also adapt to people playing on PC, right?
Yeah,
because everything you can do on the controller, you have to be able to do on the PC, and we've got to. And people coming from PC games have assumptions for what various keys mean. What is the I key or the M key or the X key? What are those things that you do in other games that are kind of like this?
Yeah, exactly. And there's just on the controller you've got a lot fewer buttons, and so you have to sometimes have fun gymnastics to get those buttons to do everything you want.
How do I check our?
It's over to the left, and it's behind my head. So we're just going to switch to only right.
Oh,
camera.
yeah, I'm racking them up.
Oh, nice. So the exploit works.
Yes.
Awesome.
And I got this from watching Cot Jockey and I think Mom Prince videos, actually.
So as long as you're stealthy, it counts?
Well, it's a total exploit.
It's as long as the move gets pulled off.
As long as the move gets pulled off.
So there's an exploit to sort of make that move happen at inappropriate times. It still counts for the challenge.
Here at Undead Labs, I mean, this was a feature. This isn't an exploit.
Oh yeah, of course.
We completely. I mean, we're glad you guys found it because it was a secret. But way to go is all I'm saying. Way to go.
Oh hey, Liamy Poo is here. So hi, Liamy Poo.
Oh wow, hi.
And Schatzner agrees that is a total feature.
Yeah, total feature.
And so as you guys might have noticed, we do have a guest here today. This is Andy Collins.
Whoa!
Andy Collins. He is the lead writer on State of Decay 2, and and that really means something because
it does mean something.
I'll tell you what it means in a second.
Playing?
This is I think this is actually core game.
Okay, because these guys are mad.
I would talk to Nick and get this density dialed down a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, if
Those
only we could update.
Those guys don't like me. I'm a likable person, Andy.
They don't know you.
I'm likable.
Gosh darn it, you are.
That's it. I'm just gonna kill him.
You have no choice.
I'm likable, but I'm gonna kill him. This is not life advice, by the way, kids.
Yeah, exactly.
Driving your car over people that disagree with you?
Yep,
No,
especially
bad call.
Especially loud people.
Yep.
I'm a big defender of loud people.
Oh, take that porta potty.
So one of the reasons we wanted to have Andy Collins here with us is because
Good gracious.
It's because we wanted to talk a little bit about some of the challenges of working with a game where you don't actually know who the main character is going to be most of the time. In most games, there's a lot of things that are sort of a given for you. You know who the main character is. You don't quite know what the player's going to do moment to moment, but you have a general sense of who's going to be doing what, when, and you can write dialogue for it. You can plan a story out around it. But in this game, any character you can play could die.
Right. No single main character and no single overarching storyline that everyone is going to go through in the same order every time. Means that you have to prepare for an immense number of potential situations and triggers and complications. The one advantage we had was because we were making a sequel for the first game, we knew a lot of the common triggers. Like I was able to come up with, okay, well, I see a zombie, I see a feral, I found something, I didn't find anything. A lot of our simple lines were easy to do, but the more we worked on the game, the more things we found of, oh, wouldn't it be cool if the player's character or your companion or an NPC were able to react to this, or this other thing, or this other thing. And the list just kept getting longer and longer and longer the more we went, because the more of those little reactions you can provide, the more real, the more immersive the world feels. When characters are reacting to the things around them, it stops being just a collection of pixels and game mechanics and starts feeling like the world. That's what we want, right? We want this game to feel like you're immersed in it and you're terrified on a moment-to-moment basis of what might happen.
Yeah, a lot of the players' feelings, they kind of key off what the characters are saying.
Right,
here, right?
Right. We need the characters to be able to express those emotions of fear or joy or surprise or what have you.
But one of the challenges, though, is like if we were making a game like, say, Doom or something like that, where you're always playing the same character. Okay, in that actually, that's a bad example. The character doesn't talk, I don't think. But some other game where, Uncharted or something, where you're playing a single character all the time. If you want to get that kind of reactivity out of the character, there's one voice you're writing all those lines for. But in this case,
we wrote for a lot more voices than that. I did not work on the original State of Decay. I came in just as we were working on expansion content. Certainly a player from day one, but joined the game a little bit after release. From what I was able to sort of piece together, I think we had around 6-ish.
I think it was, we had 6 playable voices.
Character voices. So
plus some extra NPC voices for people like Eric Tan and Montresor, who you didn't play.
So depending on which character you were playing at any given time, there was one of about a half a dozen different voices. And that was pretty cool, but if you played as long as any of you folks have played, you know that the voices start getting repetitive.
No.
There are some tech tricks that we do to make it feel like there's more voices, but ultimately, like, there's only so many voices in the game.
There it is.
You got it?
Boom!
Woo! Already, nice work, Brant.
Now I can go
more
loud.
Challenges for me. Thank you, Brant.
Now I can go loud.
So one of the very earliest things that I wanted to, one of the very earliest goals on the game was find a way to expand the variety of voices in the game. Just a bigger range of characters so that we're representing a broader swath of the potential Americana population that we're trying to draw from. The game has always been about lots of voices, lots of people, broad spectrum of society. We don't want everybody to sound the same.
Yeah, we don't want to just pick sort of some random like hero character voice.
Right.
And then we want these to feel like your neighbors. And you know, you know a lot of different people from a lot of different places, and everyone's sort of got their own distinctive, unique sound.
So that means we need male and female voices. We need voices of different ages. We need voices of different ethnic backgrounds.
Yeah, dialects.
While at the same time trying to avoid any of them being singularly representative of one of those demographics. We don't want this to be the black guy voice, for instance, or the white lady voice, or what have you, like that, because then you get into all sorts of other problems with representation and things like that. So building the plan of how many voices do we think we can afford to record for, and who are we going to put in this game was a really interesting challenge.
Because it's a trade-off, right? Like the fewer voices you have, the more each voice can say.
Exactly.
And as you start expanding the number of voices, it just becomes unfeasible for them to say a certain number of different things. You got to start scaling that back.
It's a giant math problem, which of course is exactly what every writer gets into this business to do, is to work on giant math problems. But yeah, it's multiplication, right? If you say we're going to have 6 different voices in this game, and we can afford to record X thousand lines, well, there's some division for you, and you can figure out how many lines they each get. But if you want 12 different voices, well, now you can only record half as many lines for each voice. Finding that
incendiary shotgun.
Oh yeah, by the way, I loaded you up with an incendiary shotgun, Brand. Is that cool?
So So finding that
I'm
trade-off
gonna take a look at it.
was an interesting challenge early on, and ultimately we settled on a number of voices. I don't know if we're saying exactly the number.
It's more.
It's more than the original game had. More than 10.
Yeah. I'd say it's at least twice as much voice varieties we had in the original game.
And then for the playable characters, and then we also included a nice range of voices for folks that you meet in the world, but aren't playable characters. So all told, there are a couple of dozen of different voices of people that you can meet and interact with in the world, which is a bigger number than we were able to do in the first game. Other things, our budget was bigger. Money solves a lot of problems. Not all of them, but a lot of them.
And we had you basically full-time managing this
and we
sheer
had full-time
volume
writing work on this rather than having to also do a ton of design work. So having those luxuries let us build a plan where, like, okay, we're going to have lots of voices in this game. So, but that's just a spreadsheet, right? Then the next thing is figuring out, well, how are we going to craft all these voices?
One quick, Real Zombient was saying, hopefully there's some Asian voices in the game, and I think we can say that
we've got a couple. Again, like I wish we had more. Like I wish we could have had 50 voices in the game. So we knew that we couldn't represent everyone in the world. We can't have every accent because even Asian voices is too broad a category to be fair to anyone. What does that mean? You want somebody who is third generation Chinese immigrant who's
from Houston.
Who's from Houston and maybe doesn't even speak with a discernible accent, but you know is Asian because you cast an Asian actor. Or do you want somebody who's got a very strong Indian accent? Maybe they just emigrated, a year ago, and English is their second language, and they've got that strong Indian musicality to the voice. So we tried to represent a pretty broad swath. It's not everybody. Like, we know that. There are folks who'd be like, oh, why didn't you have somebody who sounds X or Y? We're not going to claim that we got everybody, but I think we did a pretty good job given the budget and time that we had.
Well, and if you combine the character models that we have and the variant voices that we have like this incredible inclusiveness. I mean, as far as the kinds of regular people we are representing in America. I mean, it's amazing to me every time I play. I've never played the same character.
I'm pretty proud of the diversity we got in our voices. We've got some questions that we can maybe quasi-answer in some cases. Is Drew coming back? Not answering that question yet. Drew is one of our favorite people in the world, but
you're talking about Drew, the actor
Drew Hobson,
the actor who played Marcus in the original game.
And
also Sasquatch.
Yeah.
FYI, one of the nicest human beings who's ever lived.
Super
pretty
great
cool.
guy. We love working with him. Is there a full-fledged English accent? There is not. We do have a couple of regional American dialects that show up here and there. But I originally had when I said, what if we had 40 voices? Then I had a much broader range. We have no English accents.
We couldn't do English because they're all evil.
Right.
We don't have any villains in the game.
Everybody knows they
who
only
would
play
who
the
would have
Empire.
the English accent?
There I am stereotyping.
So no. Once we get to the inevitable expansion of State of Decay Europe, then of course we'll have English accents and French accents and Greek accents, and we'll cover the whole stretch. That is not canon.
Unconfirmed, by the way. State of Decay Europe.
Yeah. Cons Taylor Star points out that yes, sometimes accents do not match our mental models of what people look like, and that is another oddity to crafting voices with faces. Right?
Yeah, that's
there's the classic scene in Fargo where the Asian American actor speaks with that classic Minnesota accent, and it's very off-putting, but it's real.
It's legit, right?
There are folks who don't look like they match their accent, but that's just how accents work. If you grow up in an area, you pick it up.
Welcome to America.
Yeah, exactly. I remember when I when I came back from studying abroad in England after a few months, I had picked up a couple of touches of that accent because I had been around it, and my friends all gave me shit about it. You can't help it when you're around it.
Yeah, but one of the things we do try to do, though, like our character generation system has got some stuff set up in it, though, to try to keep it from being too, like, completely kind of strange, just because, you know, when you're crafting a character specifically, like a character in something like Fargo, where every character is planned out and figured out, there's a backstory to them and everything, it's very easy to say, yeah, this is a character that you didn't realize that there was a person like this, but there totally are people just like this. And you can sort of set defy expectations and do surprising things with people's backgrounds. But when your audience knows that the characters are randomly generated, then you've got a different challenge, right? Because you can't actually spend the time to lovingly craft an explanation for why this character is surprising and interesting and different and offbeat.
It just feels wrong.
Yeah. So exactly. If they're surprising and different and offbeat, what it feels like is the random number generator is broken, and it feels like a bug. And so we have to walk this fine line where we're trying to get a nice broad representation of you know, familiar people that you could meet, you know, all over the place in America, while at the same time trying not to go so far off the beaten path that it starts to feel like we just didn't care. You know, that we just like, I'll just take all these names and all these appearances and just throw them in a big pile and pick it out at random.
Right. One of the keys in casting our actors for these various voices, because like we had ideas for the kinds of accents or dialects we were looking for, but in casting our actors, what we were ultimately looking for is folks who could deliver the verisimilitude of real people in the State of Decay universe. Like, we weren't looking for really strong accents. We were looking for people who sounded like regular American people.
Yeah,
right?
None of our accents sound like Apu from The Simpsons, right? Like, no, like we're not trying to do any of those kinds of voices.
We have
where it's
African American actors, we have Hispanic actors, we have Caucasian actors, we have mixed race actors, we have Chinese American actor, we have an Arab American actor, and if you're sitting there watching and listening, in some cases you go like, yeah, I can hear an accent there, but other times when you're not looking at them, it's just a voice. It's just a voice. And like you can't, there's no easy stereotypes to attach to those voices in many cases, and I think that's good, right? If you can hear a voice and picture it attached to 18 different faces, then I think we've done a pretty good job.
Yeah, Montprance is losing his mind because you just said Arab American. So yeah.
We try.
Yeah,
we really do.
Again, so not all these are attached to playable characters. Like I said, we've got some voices that are nice that are attached to folks you can meet in the world. But with, you know, it's a, like I say, I'm happy. I'm proud of the range we got. In a perfect world with you know, endless more hours and dollars, we would put even more. Who knows? Make sure this game sells 20 million copies, and maybe we'll find a way to get some more voices.
You guys heard it here. Go 20 million copies.
So because the difference between a playable voice and a non-playable voice is basically just the sheer number of lines you have to cover for a playable character. Right.
If you're gonna be running around with this voice attached to your character, we need a greater range of things you react to. For instance, you're gonna be talking about more stuff around your base.
Yeah.
You're gonna be commenting on more things, and we also need a greater range of variation in any given trigger. If you're just a non-playable character that you hang out with occasionally, you might need only 2 or 3, hey, I see a zombie lines. But if you're going to be playing that character for hours on end, you probably need more like 8 or 10 or 12, right? Just so you don't get tired of those variations. So
yeah, we're trying to avoid pony lines.
Yeah,
are these guys supposed to be together? Oh yeah, this is a story. Okay.
Yeah, story time.
Our playable characters, we recorded thousands of lines for each of those voices. Whereas our non-playables, it was more in the many hundreds. And that was one of the little tricks we used to get more voices in the game. If every voice was a playable, we'd have fewer variations.
Yeah, lots.
So we did a little numeric trickery, some design work to get even more different sounding people in the game than you might otherwise expect.
Cot and Dunedain want the pony line back in.
So if you pay attention, you might find a reference to the pony line somewhere in the State of Decay 2 experience. I'm not saying where, but it could very well be that the pony line gets referenced somewhere.
There are definitely Easter eggs in this game for long-term fans. There's no question. There's so many of us here in the studio who either worked on that game and have loving memories of it, or played that game and then came into the company later. That you'll find them, and we will be happy when you do, because I think many of them will give you smiles.
So talk a little bit about the process. As you were creating the voices of these characters, because each of these, you didn't just say write a line once and say, okay, however, a couple dozen, different actors, all of you just say this same line.
Yeah, that was another thing that we did that was a little different than the first game. The first game, in order to get everything written and recorded in the time frame they had and with the resources they had, in many cases you hear the same voice say the same line in the same situation.
Or two different voices say the same line.
Yeah, sorry, two different voices.
With occasional differences based on just ad-libbing in the booth.
Right.
Right.
What we set out to do was write a unique script for every character. And anybody who has worked on a game like this, who hears me say that, tells me I'm crazy. And they're probably right. But
all right, I'm going to give up the controller for a couple of minutes.
In the long run, I'm happy with the approch.
Do you want to drive, sir?
We have a guest who has just joined us in the room.
Yeah, so we just we've got.
So we have our newest employee.
We're still trying him out. He's on probation.
Yes.
But yeah, you guys.
Definite probationary period for this youngin.
Yeah. So Jeff Strain has joined the has joined the stream over here. So do we want to?
Should I just flop in here?
Come on in.
You just flop on in there. Yeah, Brad will hang back.
I'll hang back. So I'm kicking Bran out of his chair?
Yeah, that's fine.
All right.
I'll just stand back here.
Hey, everybody, say hi to Jeff.
Creepy.
Howdy.
It's
Which
Jeff
camera am I
Strain.
looking into?
You can look at this one, I think.
No, okay, guy. Hi, everybody. How you doing?
So we were just talking about sort of the process of trying to create the sheer number of voices that are in
Wow,
the
this
sequel.
thing looks old school.
Yeah, I know,
Isn't it
right?
weird to look at?
It's already a classic.
So yes, we were.
Yeah, go ahead and finish up this.
Yeah.
So, unique script for every voice, which is kind of insane, because that means instead of writing, say, 3,000 lines, we write like 40,000 lines. And
Just imagine taking your job and multiplying it by 13 10, or 14
12,
times.
50, yeah. So I realized fairly early on the only way to do that and maintain my own sanity was to build a team of writers to work with. And this is something that I had worked on, a process that I had sort of invented for myself on a game I worked on before this, which was Marvel Heroes. Rest in peace. The game just saw its end a few days ago. I'm very sad for the studio Gazillion and all my friends who were still working there. Sorry, guys. Good luck. I hope you all land profitably other places. But to write lots of lines for lots of different voices, one of the best ways to do that is to get lots of people to write them for you, because then every person is bringing their own expertise, their own perspective, their own background, their own style to that. And then as the lead writer, I can bring that all together, make sure it all fits our needs and our house style, edit, provide feedback for writers for rewrites, and coalesce it all into one giant mass of lines for recording. So I put together a team of writers at the start of this game, and it grew over time. It ended up with, I believe we finished with 20 different people, not counting myself, writing game dialogue for State of Decay 2, which, again, is insane. Anybody who has worked on game writing will tell you that it's ludicrous trying to keep a team of 20 freelance writers working at one time, but I did it anyway. And because what it let me do was tailor each voice to the writer's skills. I didn't have to rely on people trying to write voices that were drastically outside their own background, their own expertise, their own style.
So, like, you could have a character with a Mexican accent dropping a Spanish word in now and then, and the writer that
somebody
did that,
who actually knew Spanish, who actually lived in that area, who understood that culture, who could be the expert there, the subject matter expert, and be respectful for that, rather than writing to a stereotype. So, of my 20 writers, it was pretty much, I think, right around 50-50 male and female writers. I had writers of various backgrounds, most of them U.S., but not all of them. I had an actual Canadian, for instance, writing from my sort of Canadian Minnesota accent.
An actual Canadian?
Whoa,
Actual Canadian.
It's hard to find those.
One of my longtime.
There's so few of them, and they're spread so thinly.
So nice, though. They're just such nice people. Already.
And the voices too. It's really off-putting when he shows up in one of the not very nice enclaves, and this guy who's just oh gosh, oh gee, I love it.
After watching a lot of the Fargo TV show, I do actually, I do associate that with Menace now.
Yeah.
But
so that was a challenge because it forced me to go outside my normal comfort zone in fighting writers. I had to find a lot of writers who didn't look like me, who weren't in their 40s. So I tried to find younger writers. I tried to find writers that I hadn't worked with before. And ultimately that, I think, really shows in the final product in that there are a lot of lines, a lot of character voices that I could not have written. And that the ability to recognize that early on and build a team that could write those voices, I think, is really going to deliver in that final project. I hope that the folks out there find it true as well.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
Right? Even if you assemble this very diverse writing team, everything still goes through editing. And how do you know where to draw the line when it's going through the edit process? Do you worry, does it kind of tie your hands a little bit because you don't want to cut away the unique voice and kind of homogenize everything? Are you worried about that?
That was definitely a challenge. There were occasional times where I would seek additional advice. Like I'd find another person who would say, like, hey, I'd say, give me some feedback on this line. Like, does this cross the line? Does this move into caricature, into stereotype? And I would push my writers to find that line. I'd much rather have them cross that line occasionally and be able to pull us back over it through the editing process and the review, rather than never find it. Because what I didn't want was a bunch of voices that all sounded exactly the same. Because then, why you wasted your time. So it's having enough confidence in my own skills and studying where I could. There were places where if I didn't understand a word, I looked it up, right? I didn't just always assume that, oh yeah, I'm sure they picked the right word for this or the right slang for this. Like, no, I'm going to do some research and find out what this really means.
Yeah, I did similar things. So one of my responsibilities was coming up with the name lists, the random name generator lists for the game. And, we really wanted to have these things feel authentic, right? So if you get a character whose parents are Brazilian, that it seems like they've got an appropriate last name and first name or whatever, and it can be a challenge though, because you get used to of certain characters in movies and TVs who come from certain backgrounds having certain names, and if that's all you're going off, it's very easy to just sort of get into stereotype territory. And so one thing that that I tried really hard to do was, like, for each of the cultural backgrounds I was trying to represent with these name lists, like I would try to go find someone who is from that background who could read the name list and tell me that doesn't sound familiar at all. You like, I would often pull my starting list from the internet, and then they'd be like, I've never heard that name in my life. Don't put that in there.
You get some reality checks from people who have more expertise than you. Like that's the secret to doing anything well, right? Is find people who are smarter than you at stuff. They don't have to be smarter than you in everything, but get folks who know things better than you and rely on them, trust them. And find ways to use that skill.
Do you think that would make a good management style?
If only more studios learned that one.
I'll have to think about that hard.
Yeah, could you take that one under advisement?
Yeah.
So it was a fascinating process, right? Like as I said, I met a lot of folks that I hadn't worked with before. I was exposed to some styles of speech that weren't familiar to me. I, for instance, am not a 22-year-old who grew up in urban Los Angeles. Turns out there's some modes of speech that are a little different there, et cetera, et cetera. Right.
Yeah, no, I learned a lot of interesting stuff too. We had like when I was going through the name list from Laos, for instance. I talked to someone that I know who was explaining that not only do you have your first name and your last name, but almost everyone goes by a nickname that is unrelated to either of them. That I think like deep somewhere in the history or the culture, it's about it was at some point about tricking evil spirits and having a name, having not using your real name all the time. But now it's just a tradition.
habit,
You know,
right.
it's just habit. It's what people do. And so, you know, so my friend's name is Serenith, but she goes by Pooh with her friends, which means crab. And so as I was like, so that name is sitting there waiting, you know, in the game for somebody. I made that one a little bit lower incidence because it's Pooh. But there's, you know, there's a lot of you know, things like that. Like each of the different backgrounds we were trying to represent tried to figure out, like, well, how do people from here get named? How do people from this place get named? And we tried to make a system that was broad enough that it could cover a lot of different traditions.
One of the most fascinating things about game design in general is our browser histories. The sheer number of things that we look up on a day-to-day basis, whether it's, you know,
Yeah, I wanted
naming
to talk to you about
traditions.
a couple of those things.
Naming traditions. Like, there are days where I realize I've spent, you know, the entire afternoon looking up firearms and explosives and things like that. Like, I just made a watch list somewhere.
You can join me on the ATF.
Yeah.
Like, be careful list.
But yeah, it's one of the amazing parts about the job is that you have to learn things from everywhere along the way. It's just, you can't help but do it.
So, Jeff, one of the things that we've been talking about for the past couple of months is the fact that we haven't had guests here for a while because we've been crunching pretty hard. And I was just during the pre-show, I was just expressing my relief that we can have guests here again because a couple of days ago you were like, okay, you know, we're hitting kind of a stopping point with the crunch. We're gonna keep working.
Hit a
really
nice
hard.
milestone. Take a breath.
Yeah, and move on. And the thing that I really appreciated appreciate working here in general is how you know, crunch a lot of times ends up being kind of an inevitable part of working in this industry, and it's hard to be a complete purist about it. But this is among the companies I've worked at, this is the one that's been the most humane and in its approach to crunch. And I just wanted to, I don't know, throw that subject at you and just sort of like, I think people spend too much time either deriding or justifying crunch, and I kind of wanted to give you a chance to sort of express your approach to it.
Okay, sure. Well, you know, first of all, something that I've long believed, you know, having come through the crucible of the early years of this industry, particularly when crunch was something that was, you know, very abusive in the early years of the industry, right? You know, my philosophy on it has always been, and continues to be, that crunch is, in theory, avoidable, but we never actually get there, right? It's like the mathematical notion of, you know, asymptotic, right? That you can asymptotically approach something, but you never actually cross the line, right? And I feel like just after 22 years in this industry, I always feel like that's the case, right? You go through a project, you learn things, you can always look back and say, here's where we could have been more efficient. Here's where we could have stayed, you know, where our initial projections could have been more accurate, because that's a lot of times what actually happens. And you try to incorporate that all in the next time around. And you still find yourself coming into the you know, towards the latter part of the project, you find yourself getting into situations where you're like, look, we're going to have to put the gas down right here.
Yeah.
If only the last 10% of a project
Right.
only took 10% of the time.
And I want to differentiate, before I go any further, between, there's a difference between crunch and working your ass off, right? This is not, you know, the banking industry, right? And no offense to anybody who works in the banking industry, I'm not trying to say they don't work hard, but the hours that are at least the customer-facing hours are fairly regulated, right? You know, it is, if you want to work in the game industry, you have to come in with the expectation that you are going to work hard. And I don't think that there is anybody out here working on this project who did not come in expecting and wanting to work hard. Like, we're passionate about what we do. Are you guys even listening?
You said something about work.
We're passionate about what we do. We love what we do. You know, if we didn't want to work hard, we'd be doing other things, right?
Yeah.
But there's a difference between that and crunch, right? And crunch is, you know, traditionally when either the work hours or the workload becomes so extreme that it has a material impact on your personal life, right? And that's to me kind of the toxicity of it, right? Is, you know, I've got lots of kids. I have a a wife and family that I love very much and I'm devoted to, and I certainly don't want to spend my entire career never seeing them, right, and not being home for dinner and not helping with homework and all those things, right? So to me, it's all about, like, we have to acknowledge that we work hard. We have to acknowledge that this industry is demanding. It's competitive. But at the same time, we want to kind of structure the development process so that we're not chronically putting our lives, trashing our lives, because I'll tell you, the years go by fast, right? So, for this project, absolutely, we got to a point where there was more work left to be done than time left to do it. And that is always compounded, especially when you're working on a game that everybody loves and is excited about. It's compounded by everybody's desire to do more, right? And you can't do everything, but you also don't want to just kind of say, well, we're going to do the bare minimum, right? And so balancing that and understanding the impact on everybody's lives is tough. It takes a lot of thought, a lot of planning. Here we try very hard to make it not about just hours, but instead about tasks. So sitting down with people and saying, here's what we have to get done. I know this is probably more than a normal hardworking job would require. Is this something you can sign up to do? And we give people that kind of individual mandate to say yes or no, or I could do it, but I need the following things, right? And when you do it that way, when you make it more about what we need to get done and not just this kind of blanket, hey, we have to work 50 hours or 60 hours or 80 hours or 120 hours.
Put FaceTime in at the office.
That's right. FaceTime is incredibly important, but I find that people respond to that a lot better, because then they feel like there's a reason, right? That yes, here are the things we need to get done. Here's what I have to do in order to get that done. It's not just some chronic, I'm working 80 hours a week for the rest of my life, and I'm all on, right? I am, right? And even that, you don't want that to be something that year after year after year. But for when you're working on an awesome game, and that you've got millions of fans out there, literally, like, excited to get their hands on it and play it, that's highly motivating, and and we all want to kind of chip in and do the extra effort to get that done. We just have to do it in a very kind of thoughtful way, so that we could do a State of Decay 3 or a State of Decay 4 or a State of Decay 5 someday, right?
Yeah, so everyone just doesn't just drop dead at the end.
I'm not announcing anything. I'm just saying theoretically, right?
Confirmed.
Jeff Strain confirmed State of Decay 3. But you would like to believe that the people who worked on State of Decay are working on State of Decay 2, and most of them are. You would like to believe that if there are future titles in the State of Decay world, that a lot of those same people will be working on there, because that's how you bring that sense of consistency.
You don't want to be sick of it by the time you're done.
That's right. That's right. So yeah, it's a balancing act, and I appreciate you telling me you feel like we're handling it at least sanely. And we're not done yet, but definitely as you said, right, we've made some big achievements here recently that have allowed us to at least catch our breath a little bit, which is nice.
I feel like there are two big ingredients to why it works here. One is that as a studio, this feels a little more senior than other places I've been. There are not a lot of 22-year-olds here, right? As opposed to other places where it's like, oh yeah, it's mostly 22-year-olds with no lives, and sort of nobody cares if we work them 14 hours a day.
And sometimes you feel like that's almost like their top-level strategy. Let's hire a bunch of young people who we can abuse. And that is not the approach, the hiring approach is taken here.
That was certainly an industry norm for a long time.
And still is at some places, sadly. But the studio itself is mature enough that none of us are willing to work those hours. Right? If Jeff had said, like, well, guys, sorry, but between now and the beginning of March, I'm going to need 60 hours apiece from all of you. He would have said, well, no. Right? And Jeff, in his wisdom, has never asked us to do things like that. That's a lot of screamer.
Well,
that's sort of the reality. You're reacting to the reality.
It is. Although I'd like to say it's just a guy, but it's the business, right? Yeah. The fact is that the vast majority of the people who worked on State of Decay are working on State of Decay 2, and the game is better for them, substantially better for that kind of carry forward of talent and experience, right? And you know, that's the only way. If you absolutely burn people up just to get across the line with no thought whatsoever for kind of future days, right? Then you have to you just get this kind of generational effect,
right?
You know,
and
that's just not
good
business.
lose institutional knowledge.
Yeah,
You
and
lose that tribal experience,
and your games ultimately suffer for that. Right?
And then the other aspect that makes it work that you had touched on is showing people not just here's the clock you have to punch, but here are the reasons. Here are the reasons that we're doing this. We're doing this to accomplish this thing and this thing and this thing, and getting people to buy it. Like, well, yeah, we have to have that in the game. I'm gonna put in the hours that are required to get that in the game. Like, I was working on something last week that I knew I had to be. Like, I'd been imagining this thing for months and months and months. This feature needed to be in the game, and it was on me to build. And if it had just been like, well, Andy, work, your regular schedule, I might have been like, oh, I don't need to do that. But I knew it needed to be in, so I was going to work those extra hours, whether Jeff had asked me or not, because, God, I wanted that feature to be in. So getting people to buy in on that and showing them, look, we're not just saying work 10 more hours or 20 more hours. We're saying we need you to get this, this, and this. And you can go, oh, I see why that's necessary. I understand what that's going to do to the game. Being involved in that decision-making is critical. Right?
Yeah.
It's that difference between responsibility and authority. Right?
Yeah.
Like when you're just responsible for doing stuff, you can feel divested from the importance of it. But when you have the authority to be involved in the decisions for what's going in and what's not, then you're like, well, yeah, I'm going to do it. I was part of the decision that said we needed to be in the game, so of course I'm going to put the hours in.
Yeah, and that's one thing that's worked really well. Is, we've put a lot of effort on this team into like kind of diversifying who is responsible for things, who has authority for things. So there's been a lot of features that have been, where the development of something has been led by the programmer involved rather than some designer, and a lot of times,
the artist
involved, where it's like, there's some companies that are structured around just a hierarchy of designers making decisions, and then they treat everybody else like they're like the factory workers. But here, I've really appreciated the efforts we put into, pulling in people from every discipline to be decision makers on features and to be, invested that way, so that, so I have a lot of discussions with programmers where they are the one who's passionate about getting this design to work a certain way, and I'm just there to sort of fill in the gaps and arrange all the details, but really the creative driving force behind it is the programmer or an artist. And that feels really refreshing. I mean, some people, might imagine that a designer would be happier to have all the authority, but no, like I'm way happier working on a team where everybody's creatively invested and everybody's got, a sense of, of responsibility for the things that we're building, and is invested that way, because just everybody ends up doing better work, and I end up being more proud of the final product, even if I had less to do with it.
Well, I think what it comes down to as well is that, that first game, it was an ambitious project for a small team. And it shows that it was ambitious for a small team. But it also, as we heard over and over again, and I think a big part of why it was very successful is it had a lot of heart, right? It's the little touches, it's the little things, the little moments of delight that you find in the environment or in the mechanics or in the way a certain finishing move works. And you can tell that it was a team that had their heart in it, right?
Yeah.
And to me, that's the difference between great games and just kind of okay games.
Here, I thought it was a picture of that chicken.
Right, and so preserving that and making sure that we always maintain that as a development team is super important to me. Players can tell if a team's heart was in it or if it was just a
phoned in
paint by numbers project, right? Yeah. And the truth is that sometimes those paint by numbers projects actually do really well and have a lot of players, right? And that's great, right? But what I do know is that when you put your heart into it, and when you've got a team that's excited about what they're doing and loves what they're doing, it shows. And players can see it and they appreciate it. And that, there are many paths to the success in the industry, many different ways that you can have successful games. This is what we choose. What we choose is to make games with players, and with all that comes along with that, both pro and con.
So, by the way, I apologize. I've been so involved in this discussion, I have not been keeping up with the chat, mostly just because I couldn't even think of what I would want to interrupt in order to.
Somebody wants to see Brant leaning in a little closer. Yeah. They miss you.
Yeah.
They miss you.
I'm actually going to check out and let you guys close it out. Just
well, thanks for coming.
Stop in and say hello. Thank you, everybody. How do we 40? What's our current time? I saw 40 something earlier.
No, I think you're probably right that Jeffrey has a little more projection. He's a little closer to the mic.
Anyway, thank you, everybody, for coming to watch today.
Yeah.
Can't wait to put something awesome in your hands real soon now.
Yeah, so everyone, thank Jeff Strain for being here.
Thank you, Jeff.
Yep, Brent, you're back in.
All right, so we've got about 10 minutes left. So anybody, if you had a question that you asked that you wanted us to get, please re-ask it.
Yeah.
So because we've got another 10 minutes, we can
You're
answer.
in bad shape there, sir.
We can answer whatever questions we are allowed to.
Right on the edge.
That's how I live every single day of my real world life too, Andy.
Brant walks around with a health bar, blinking red.
That's right.
All day, every day.
That's only because I'm really old. Ow.
So we've still got Andy Collins here. So if anybody's got questions about writing, character development, storytelling in the game, I'd love to field those questions. Put up an alternate name for you too.
Writer guy. Yeah, writing voices for this game was interesting. One of the things the first game did pretty well was give you some voices that had character in them, but weren't so specific that you couldn't imagine them put on other people.
Yeah,
right? And that's not the way most people write. There are no UK accents. Sorry, not yet. Hopefully we'll get to those someday when we bring our game over to Europe.
But Garlic Burp, no. Andy is not responsible for Lily's lines. Andy came in, unless you're talking about Lily's lines in Breakdown. I think maybe you and I
we worked a little on the expansion. Yeah, the original game. Lily takes a lot of crap.
Yeah.
I think I've played the game plenty of hours as well, and I know what you're getting at. Like Lily's lines can get a little grating at times. I don't think that's entirely fair to blame that on writing or acting or anything. Some of it's just the way it was decided. Frankly, I'm going to blame designers. Her lines come out a little too often.
When we
get a little too naggy because of the way they're designed.
We had an entire folder discussion topic called OMFG Lily STFU because for a while we had an issue where her lines were firing off every 5 seconds, and it took us a while to catch up with it, and so people played without sound for a long time.
Yeah, so but that's an interesting observation, and one that we took to heart in building the second game. So how do we learn from that? This is a voice that. There's nothing wrong with this voice, or really with the lines that are written. I mean, a couple of them are a little too memorable, but that's a hard line to draw. But you heard them too often. You heard her too often, and you heard lines too often, so that they became memes, really, in your head. And so that's something we tried to avoid by getting more voices and more variations and what have you. But that's just an example of a game doing what they could with the resources they had.
Well, so one of the advantages of Lily in the original game was the fact that we could have this entire category of lines that only one voice had to deliver. And so that means we could have all these reminders and all these messages about missions and all this stuff, and we didn't need to record them with 6 voices. Right. Record them with 1 voice. And so one of the the best solution to that is to, instead of having be one voice, have it be multiple voices. Have all the characters delivering those lines, which means you get a lot more variety, and you don't have a single character who stands out to you as the nag. But at the same time, that's way more expensive because that number you have to then multiply that number of lines by however many characters you have.
Yeah. So finding a way to thread that needle and have voices that feel interesting and different without being so memorable that hearing them on a second character breaks your immersion was an interesting challenge. I'm not going to claim we did it perfectly, but it was fun, right? Because usually the opposite is your challenge. How do I make every single voice memorable and perfect and just right for this one character? So there's so many ways where writing for this game is not like any other kind of writing I've ever done.
Yeah. Versoli was asking a question about building relationships in the game. When you've got a bunch of random characters, how do you make it feel like they've got relationships to each other? It's kind of, I wouldn't say that's a problem that we've solved.
It is a fascinating challenge in a game like this. I've been watching Westworld recently. We don't have HBO, but we just got the discs recently, and I remember from the first episode saying, "Oh man, I want to write this game," because like in a lot of ways it's State of Decay writ large, right? This giant open world with hundreds of characters, each with their own story. So we didn't do that. First of all, that's fiction. You can't actually do that. Nobody has done that. But that challenge of how do you make procedural characters feel real and feel like they are interacting with each other on real levels? There's lots of tricks that you do, and honestly, if you learn too many of them, you see through them and they don't work anymore. But like you use some small building blocks, attaching traits. Jeffrey built 18 billion traits for our game. That means that no two characters are ever the same. Like the combination of randomized traits you're going to get, randomized skill specializations you're going to get, the faces, the clothes, the voices, the ages. You can't get the same character twice.
And some of the strategies that I would think, once we can tell you more about the specifics of the game, we could probably get into some of the specific strategies we used in specific missions or specific situations to try to establish relationships between the characters.
So,
I feel like though it doesn't actually take that much. Once a relationship roots itself in the player's head, they can apply that throughout. Like you have like say if Ed dies. You don't necessarily have to have Marcus say anything about it. They were best friends, and you can sort of apply all the emotional weight of that yourself as an audience member, whether we support it directly or not.
If we as designers have created a world that feels, I won't say real, but believable and immersive enough, then you begin to project stories and relationships onto characters that maybe are only vaguely suggested, and sometimes aren't even suggested at all. You're 100% projecting them, because that's human. It's human nature to project our perceptions of reality on these characters. It's kind of like when you anthropomorphize your pets and give them personality that they don't really have, but you can't help but do it. It's the same.
I do that with my children too. I give them personalities they don't actually have.
You can't help. I mean, I still tell stories about one of my playthroughs of the original game where Marcus had died, but I still had Ed. Ed was my only character left from the original trio. And I got Lily's mission to go find her dad's watch or something like that. We had to go back to that original campsite. And even though Ed was by far not the best character in my community, shall we say, I knew I had to do the mission with him, right? The logical part of my brain said, no, take the good character so that you can survive this long trek. But I had to do it with Ed because it felt like he had that connection to that story.
God, what's that screen?
And that was powerful. That was really eye-opening for me as a player of the game, the power that it had over me in breaking me out of my gamer head and into my storytelling head, my story immersion head. And I think that sometimes it's the little things, the little tiny hooks that you can put in a character that let a player immerse themselves, and then they'll believe anything.
Yeah, it's interesting how much, even with a very prescriptive style of storytelling, like a movie or a book, it's interesting like how little you're actually given to work with and how most of the story still takes place in your imagination. And if you recognize that, you can realize how little you can actually do to create a story that will still live in the player's imagination.
And it's not just writing and design either. It's the art of the world, it's the mechanics of the world, it's all the little features. When you can be wandering around in the ranger station and see a note that was probably left by a character that you meet 2 hours later, like that little tiny touch makes you feel like the world is a real thing and lets you delude yourself into thinking, these are real people with real relationships that are interacting with each other. That sort of environmental storytelling is oftentimes as important, if not more important, than the actual writing storytelling. Don't tell any of the artists I said that.
One of my favorite things is when now and then
artists here.
Exactly.
Like
we're craftsmen, we're artisans.
Andy was pointing out that I've been working on the trait system. One of my favorite things is when somebody at the company will roll up a random character that has a particular combination of traits that they feel tells them a story, and they'll post it on Slack and share it with everybody, and like. And I just love it's my favorite thing because even though because I did not create that character, like all I did was make a set of building blocks and then the random number generator put that character together. But then because of the particular traits and how they came together, there's a story that arises in the imagination of the player.
They've already got a personality.
They didn't know who that personality is.
Backpacker, rebel, ran away from home. 3 random things that go rolled up, but you're like, wow, I know that person's story.
Yeah, exactly.
You 100% know everything that's happening in that person's life.
Yes, sometimes you'll see descriptions of 2 different descriptions of relationships. You're like, oh, I know that guy.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I worked with her. Oh, man. I dated that guy. Oh God, no.
So, yeah. So I think we've only got 1 minute left. If anyone, if anyone has any last-minute comments that they want to make, we've been super thrilled to be able to sit down and talk with you guys, especially since we're taking the feet off the gas just a little bit when it comes to crunching and working, so we can actually take the time to get a few of us in here and
lean back,
talk to you
I
guys.
can't believe we had a rare and amazing sighting of the Jeff Strain.
Jeff Strain in the wild. Yeah,
that was
I've seen
cool.
more unicorns than Jeff Strain on this show. So that's awesome.
Real Zombie, I haven't read this yet. Real Zombie says he's got a question he's not sure we can answer. When you recruited a character in State of Decay 1 and you were driving them to your community, they would tell you a story and would give them a trait. Is that a thing in State of Decay 2?
Yeah, that's totally a thing. We did a ton of those. That was one of my favorite parts of the first game.
You're asking the right guy about that.
One of my favorite parts of the first game, except when you heard the same story from the third and fourth and fifth person. So we tried to build a system that was much bigger and much more respective of the sheer number of hours that people were going to play. So, yeah, there's lots of interesting backstories. Another one of the great advantages to having all these writers working on this is that all these backstories didn't come out of my head. They came out of 20 different people's heads.
Real Zombie was particularly fond of the toilet paper story from the original game. So
yeah, I think we've got at least 1 or 2 lines commenting about toilet paper. Because that's a thing, man. If you're gonna run out,
we might even have. I cannot confirm whether there's an actual toilet paper item in the game, but yeah, just sort of use your imaginations. We're trying to. It was either you or Jeff who talked about just like the little touches being...
Only 3 days, Kia? I'm disappointed. Only 3 days? Come on. Where's the love?
But yeah.
5 days minimum.
A lot of times it's those little tiny touches that make the difference, sort of make you sort of fall in... Not just enjoy a game, but kind of fall in love with a particular character or a particular place. And so between, the artists adding their visual touches, us, throwing in these like weird little traits that kind of are rare and they come out of nowhere, to sort of the weird confluence of different things coming together randomly. Like, we're hoping that the game is generating a lot of these little like kind of off-kilter moments to make you sort of stop and think and remember something.
And again, those are the things that come out of devs that love the project they're working on. Like, we are lucky to be working in a studio and on a project that a lot of people are pouring not just hours into, but pouring soul into, right? Whether Brant is one of the stalwarts in the studio when it comes to delivering the State of Decay experience. Like, he is one of the touchstones that we go to over and over again. Like, hey, are we hitting it yet? And he'll tell us when we're not, right? And that's important. And having folks like that who are going to pour themselves into their area of expertise and not just give you, well, here's the 20 guns you need, but no, you said you only needed 20. I gave you 50.
But I also stick my nose into other disciplines.
As well you should, right? And that's one of the I think the joys of this studio is we have folks who not just are willing to talk across disciplines, but have the knowledge and expertise to do so, right? You're not just some loudmouth who wanders over into design and tells them what to do. You're sharing the expertise that comes from years of experience, not just working on this game, but in the industry in general. And you're sharing that insight. Like,
it's this game and State of Decay 2 is testament to that kind of force multiplier that almost everybody on this team brings, right? Everybody brings this this wealth of experience that sort of we put on in a slow cooker, and it makes a fantastic chili.
And on that note,
fantastic chili.
On the note of fantastic chili, we're going to sign out. But
thanks, everybody. I need to make one comment. Mom Prince, do not quit your job to play State of Decay 2.
Especially because I can't promise you that the same glitches you've been using to pull off your stuff is going to work in State of Decay 2.
Vacation time is fine. Leave of absence if you need it.
Thank you, Garlic. I love tacos.
Hold on to your employment.
All right. Well, thanks, everybody. And we're going to do our official awkward sign-off.
You guys are the best.